Malcolm watched from the doorway most days, arms crossed, his eyes following Claire's every move, the way she adjusted a knee brace, how she praised Ruth's smallest victories like they were gold medals. One morning, Claire brought music into the room, jazz with soft, steady rhythms. Ruth's eyes lit up. She likes Billie Holiday, Malcolm said, leaning against the doorframe. Claire smiled. She's got taste. The days settled into a rhythm. Claire helped with chores in the morning, worked with Ruth in the afternoon, and shared dinner with Malcolm in the evenings, sometimes quiet, sometimes laughing, always easy. One Thursday night, as a storm rolled in, they sat on the porch, listening to the low rumble of thunder. "Why'd you leave your job?" Malcolm asked quietly, eyes on the horizon. Claire hesitated, her fingers curling tighter around her mug. "I didn't leave. I was forced out." He turned to look at her but said nothing. "I was working at a private rehab clinic," she said slowly. "A patient, the son of a powerful man, wasn't responding to treatment. I told the family the truth politely, but honestly." Her voice tightened. 2 weeks later, I was accused of misconduct. No evidence, just whispers. They said I was inappropriate. The board didn't even question it. I was gone before I could defend myself. Malcolm exhaled. "You ever fight it?" "I tried. But the system, when you're just a woman, and the accusation is enough to stain you, doesn't care about the truth." Silence fell. The thunder cracked again. "I'm sorry," he said. Claire glanced at him. "Don't be." I needed to fall apart. I didn't know it then, but now, maybe I do. He nodded. Sometimes the storm clears out what needed breaking. They sat in the hush that followed, the only sound the tapping of rain against the tin roof. Later that night, Claire couldn't sleep. She stood by the cabin window, watching lightning spider across the sky. Her chest felt tight, not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning, she found Malcolm in the barn, wrestling with a jammed feed machine, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat, hands greasy and scratched. "Need help?" she called. He looked up and grinned. "Got a PhD in mechanical engineering hiding under that therapist's badge. Try me." Together, they worked the bolts loose, her small hands reaching where his couldn't. At one point, he reached past her, their shoulders brushing, and they both froze. For a second, neither spoke. Then the machine rattled to life. Claire grinned. "You owe me. I'll add it to your tab," he said, voice low. They didn't talk about the moment again, but it sat between them, warm and unspoken. That evening, Ruth sat up straighter than she had in weeks. Claire helped her to the porch, bundling her in a blanket. "Sunset's beautiful," Ruth murmured. "It is," Claire agreed. Malcolm came out with a bowl of peach cobbler and 2 spoons, handing one to Claire and passing the bowl to his mother. She took it with a shaky smile. "Not bad for a girl with nowhere to go," he said, glancing sideways at Claire. She nudged him gently. "Not bad for a man who thinks chickens are jazz legends." They laughed, and for the first time, the porch didn't feel like a place to escape the rain. It felt like home. The air was crisp the next morning, carrying the scent of hay and woodsman. Claire stepped into the barn with a leather-bound notebook tucked under her arm. Malcolm was up on a ladder, fixing a bulb. "Morning," she said, looking up. He grunted in greeting, fiddling with the socket. "You're up early." "I promised Ruth I'd try a new hand strength routine today. Thought I'd review the plan first." She opened the notebook, revealing detailed sketches of muscle groups and notes on Ruth's progress. He climbed down, wiping his hands on a rag. "You always this meticulous." Claire smiled, half proud, half sheepish. "Used to be part of my job to plan 2 weeks ahead, adjust on the fly, and justify every stretch with a medical reason." He looked at her, serious now. "You were good at it, weren't you?" "I was," she said quietly. But Ruth was sitting upright in her recliner when Claire entered the living room. A soft instrumental track played, and sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, warming the room. Claire knelt beside her, placing a foam ball in her hand. "All right, Miss Ruth," she said, her tone light but focused. "Let's show this ball who's boss today." Ruth smirked, then slowly squeezed without a verbal cue. Claire's eyes shone. Malcolm stood in the doorway, unnoticed, watching his mother, once a sharp-tongued matriarch, now gritting her teeth to raise her right arm. Claire held her elbow, whispering praise for every centimeter of movement. That afternoon, while hauling buckets from the well, Malcolm turned to Claire, who was adjusting a gate hinge. "Would you want to stay?" he asked. She paused, eyes narrowing. "You mean longer than a few days?" He nodded. "Maybe a few weeks, maybe more." Claire didn't answer right away. The idea was warm, dangerous. "I'd like that," she said finally. "If you're sure." "I am," he said. This place has been quiet too long. That night they sat on the porch again, but the silences had shaped to them now, like two people listening to the same melody. Claire sipped her tea while Malcolm tuned an old radio, static flickering between country songs and baseball games. You know, she said, when I was little, I thought farms were like fairy tales, rolling hills, sunflowers, family dogs. Malcolm raised a brow. You were lied to. She laughed. Clearly, there was a beat of silence. Then she said, absently, I think I could fix that broken handrail on the side porch. It's bothering me. He looked at her, smiled. Be my guest. The following days passed in a rhythm both new and familiar. Claire tended to Ruth, helped with feed runs, and repaired the porch rail with precision. Malcolm introduced her to the local hardware clerk, the grocer who forgot to label peaches, and the mailman who asked if she was the girl who wandered in from the storm. Claire smiled. Something like that. But behind the ease, something heavier brewed. One evening while sorting books in a storage shed, Claire found a dusty metal box. Inside were faded photographs. Ruth in her youth, Malcolm in a football jersey, and a man she didn't recognize, standing in front of the farmhouse. His arm was around Ruth, but her eyes held distance. That's my father, Malcolm said from behind her. Claire turned, startled. His jaw tightened. He left when I was 12. Took the truck. The savings didn't leave a note. Just disappeared. Claire closed the box gently. I'm sorry. He nodded, his voice low. It's just me and Mama now. Has been for a long time. That night, as Malcolm fixed a loose gutter under the stars, Claire brought out 2 glasses of sweet tea. Your mother asked me to play her music again tomorrow, she said. Malcolm took the glass. She doesn't ask people for things, not unless she trusts them. Claire hesitated, then said, I think I trust you, too. The words hung in the air. Malcolm met her eyes, something flickering behind his. You know, I've spent a long time thinking nobody would ever choose to stay. People come here when they're lost. They leave when they find their way again. Claire looked down, her voice soft. What if I'm still finding my way? The wind stirred the trees. Somewhere inside, Ruth coughed. Malcolm stepped closer, his tone gentler than she'd ever heard. Then stay as long as you need, and if you ever want to leave, I'll help you find the road out. Claire looked up at him, her heart unsteady. What if I don't want to leave? He didn't answer, but the way he looked at her like she was the first sunrise after a long drought said everything. Neither moved. The silence spoke for them, and for once, it was enough. The following week unfolded with a tenderness neither dared to name. Mornings began with the scent of cornbread and Ruth's deliberate movements in the sunroom, her fingers curling more confidently around the foam ball, her voice cracking out 2-word sentences. Too tight or more tea. Claire became part of the household's rhythm, feeding chickens at dawn, heating compressors at noon, jotting notes by LAMPLIGHT. But one evening, as the sun painted the barn in liquid amber, Claire stood at the kitchen window, frozen. A silver SUV pulled into the gravel driveway, its plates out of state, tires to clean for rural Georgia. Expecting anyone? She asked Malcolm as he passed behind her, drying his hands. He glanced out, brow furrowed. Not at all. Claire's fingers tightened on the sink's edge. The man who stepped out wore a pressed suit, his stride slow and calculated. He knocked 3 polite, measured raps. Claire's breath hitched. Malcolm opened the door, but she was already halfway down the hall, posture alert. Can I help you? Malcolm asked, stepping onto the porch. The man smiled thinly. I'm looking for Claire Whitmore. Claire appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of fury and dread. Dr. Whitmore, he corrected himself, lips twitching. I was hoping for a moment of your time. Malcolm looked between them. You know him? She didn't respond. Right away. This is Dr. Langston from my old clinic. Langston's smile tightened. I represent the board overseeing your review. Malcolm stepped forward. This isn't the place. Claire raised a hand. It's all right. Let him speak. Langston pulled a crisp envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. The review is closed. Charges dropped. No permanent mark on your record. The patient's family withdrew their complaint. Claire blinked. Why are you here then? I came because the board recommended reinstatement, but I also wanted to see why someone with your reputation vanished into the rural South. Malcolm bristled. That's none of your business. Claire opened the letter, her eyes scanning the page, but the words blurred with memories of screams in the ER. A flatline tone, unbearable silence. Langston stepped back, his voice softening. You were one of the best. Come back, Claire. The hospital wants you. You have a second chance. With that, he turned and walked away. They stood in silence as the SUV disappeared down the road. Claire's fingers crushed the envelope. Later, on the porch, she sat beside Malcolm, silent for a long while. The sun had slipped below the hills, leaving only crickets and the creak of the swing. "I made a mistake," she said finally. A patient coded, "I made a call. It was the wrong one." Malcolm said nothing. "I tried to fix it, but the family blamed me. So did the board. So did I." She looked at him. "I ran." He nodded slowly. "Now you have a choice." She exhaled sharply. "That's what scares me. I thought running would erase it, but it followed me here." "No," Malcolm said, his voice low. "It didn't follow you. You brought it, and now you can face it." Claire stared into the dark horizon. "And leave this." "You wouldn't be leaving," he said. "You'd just be seeing where this leads." From the shadows, Ruth's voice croaked out, startling them. "Don't waste a second chance." Claire turned. Ruth sat in her wheelchair behind the screen door, eyes watery but sharp. She hesitated. "Us. My mama, Ruth. She don't say much these days, but she appreciates company." Claire glanced toward the house, then back at him. She wasn't used to being invited without strings. Still, she nodded. "I'll come inside." The kitchen was warm with morning light and a rooted calm that seemed to live in the old floorboards. Ruth sat in a high-backed chair by the window, a wool shawl draped over her shoulders. Her gray hair was neatly braided, and her eyes dulled by a stroke, sparked with recognition as Claire entered. "She's real pretty," Ruth murmured, her voice soft and uneven. Malcolm smiled faintly. "Mama, this is Claire. She's going to sit with us this morning." Claire walked slowly to the table, sitting at the far end, careful not to impose. Breakfast passed mostly in silence, save for the clink of forks and Ruth's occasional humming. Claire ate gratefully scrambled eggs, grits, buttered toast, and crisp bacon. "You cooked like someone raised by a southern grandma," she said without thinking. Malcolm shrugged. "She taught me well. My daddy passed young. Was just us." Claire nodded. "Mine left, never came back." They didn't speak after that, but something softened between them. After breakfast, Claire stood to help with dishes, but Malcolm waved her off. "You're not staff, you're a guest." "I can still contribute," she replied, not unkindly. "It's been a while since I felt useful." He hesitated, then handed her a towel. "Then you dry, I'll wash." They moved around the kitchen like people relearning a dance, familiar yet tentative. In the silence she asked about the farm. He told her, free-range chickens, a few head of cattle, peach trees that hadn't borne fruit in 2 seasons. A busted tractor he kept fixing because he couldn't afford a compound fracture in the budget. Outside, the sun broke through, drying the muddy ground in golden streaks. Malcolm opened the back door and motioned her toward the yard. "Feel up to meeting the girls." Claire blinked. "Girls?" He nodded toward the coop. "The hens. I named them after jazz singers. Ella's the loud one. Billy's always broody." A smile tugged at her lips, the first real one since she'd arrived. "Lead the way." The air was fresh and sharp as they stepped out. The chickens clucked in greeting, pecking around the coop like queens of their domain. Claire knelt beside the fence, watching them. "They're peaceful," she said. "More than some people I know," Malcolm muttered. She looked over her shoulder. At him. "Do you always take in strays?" He paused. "Just the ones who look like they've forgotten they're worth saving." Claire didn't respond, but the words lingered. Later that afternoon, while Malcolm repaired a section of fencing, Claire sat on the porch with Ruth. She offered to massage the older woman's hands, surprised when Ruth nodded almost immediately. Claire's fingers were precise, applying gentle pressure to stiff joints, kneading up the forearms. Ruth's eyes fluttered closed. "You used to do this?" Malcolm asked from the doorway, arms crossed. "Physical therapy, mostly elderly care. Stroke recovery. She's been stiff for months. You're the first she's let touch her like that." "I think she's lonely," Claire said. "Lonelier than even she knows." "So are you," he said softly. Claire's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed. "You don't know me. I know what people look like when they stop believing in soft landings." She swallowed hard as the sky dimmed toward dusk. Standing to return to the cabin, she said, "Thanks for letting me stay." Malcolm held the door open. "You can stay longer. No strings." She looked at him, unsure whether to trust the offer, but behind him, Ruth lifted a hand slow, shaky, but deliberate, and waved. Claire's breath caught. She waved back, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a ghost. The next morning brought a gray stillness to the farm. Fog hung low over the fields, and dew clung to the grass. Claire stepped out of the cabin, wrapped in one of Ruth's old cardigans, the sleeves too long for her arms. Her boots left soft prints in the damp earth as she walked toward the main house. Inside, Malcolm sat at the dining table, sorting through a worn stack of bills, a pencil between his teeth. He looked up as she entered, the frown melting. "Morning," he said, nodding toward the coffee pot. "It's fresh." Claire poured herself a mug. "Everything all right?" He hesitated, then folded the bills into a neat pile. "Just the usual dance with the electric company. I pay a little. They threaten to cut me off. I pay a little more." Claire didn't press. Instead, she sat across from him, sipping her coffee. Silent, stretched, comfortable now. Like a blanket they both pulled around their shoulders. "I can help," she said suddenly. He chuckled softly. "Appreciate it. But I wouldn't feel right." "No," she said. "With your mother." Malcolm's eyes lifted. "I noticed she favors her left side." Claire continued. "She's got partial control of the right, but it's weakened. If you let me work with her an hour a day, we can rebuild some function, maybe even her speech." He blinked. "You do that?" She gave a small shrug. "I need to do something. I need to remember who I was before. Everything." Malcolm leaned back, watching her. "All right," he said after a beat. "We'll give it a shot." That afternoon, Claire began her sessions with Ruth. At first it was simple stretches. Ruth was resistant, her body stiff and slow, but Claire's touch was patient, her voice soft, coaxing each finger to move, each joint to release. By the third session, Ruth's hand could close around a rubber ball. By the fifth, she smiled when Claire entered the room. The next morning, Claire rose early, the smell of fresh biscuits in the air. Ruth's favorite gospel tune played faintly. Malcolm stood at the sink, scrubbing mugs. Claire walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. He turned. "You heading somewhere?" "Just the clinic in town," she said. "I need to see something for myself." He didn't stop her, just nodded. Downtown, the small medical center sat like a stone relic, familiar yet foreign. Claire stepped inside. The receptionist, Dana, froze. "Claire," Dana said softly. "Hi, Dana." Claire smiled. "I'm not sure for how long." The administrator's office smelled of lemon cleaner and old papers. Claire sat across from a man in a blue vest who didn't hide his surprise. "I heard," he said. Langston called. "I'm not here for that," Claire said. "Not yet. I just want to observe, volunteer, help where needed. To remember who I used to be." He studied her. "We've got 3 open shifts in triage. Want one?" She nodded. "I'll be back tomorrow." At evening, she returned to the farm with dirt on her shoes and tiredness in her bones, but a weight had lifted. She found Malcolm fixing a fence post, hands caked in mud. "How was the clinic?" he asked without looking up. "I saw a girl with a broken wrist. She cried like the world was ending. I wrapped it, made a joke, and she laughed." He looked at her now. "She laughed," Claire repeated. "Softer." "She laughed." Malcolm gave a crooked smile. "Sounds like the beginning of something." She shrugged. "Or maybe just a reminder." That night, as they ate dinner, Ruth reached across the table and patted Claire's hand. "Welcome home," she rasped. Claire's eyes shimmered. Maybe home wasn't a place you ran to or from. Maybe it was the space between healing and hope, where second chances felt like gifts. And maybe, just maybe, this was hers.